The Ethereum ETF is launching 1 week from today, but what does that mean for Ethereum's price? Should you back up the truck right now, load up all the ETH you can, or is this a buy the rumor, sell the news event? And I'm going to tell you where I think ETH is going to go in the 2 months following the ETH ETF approval. But right here, you can see Nate Garassi with a very, very good prediction. He said, welcome to the spot ETH ETF approval week. He's calling it. Don't know anything specific. Just can't come up with a good reason for any further delay at this point. Issuers, be ready for launch. Well, Eric Balchunas, if you didn't know who he is, he's the senior ETF analyst for Bloomberg Financial. He is saying, update, Nate's instincts were right. Hearing SEC finally got back to issuers today, asking them to return final S1s on Wednesday. That is tomorrow. But what is an S1? You can see right here is an ETF issuer must file the form S1 with the SEC to register their product. And they just got done filing that. And so this is going to show the timeline for when we can expect these ETH ETFs. So they ask them to return the final filled out paperwork on Wednesday and then request effectiveness on Monday after the close for a Tuesday launch. That's going to be Tuesday of next week, ETH ETF launch. But what does this mean for the prices, everybody? Well, this article does a pretty good job explaining everything. And then after that, folks, we're going to dive into the charts and look at what happened at Bitcoin with its ETF launch and then run some numbers. And I'm going to give you my ETH prediction 2 months outside of the launch here. Well, ETH ETFs are scheduled to begin trading next week. The Bitwise CIO is predicting $15 billion in inflows into the Ethereum ETFs by the end of next year. I think that it might actually be a little bit low because in 7 months, Bitcoin pulled in $16 billion. And so they're saying in a year and a half, ETH can do $15 billion. I think after a year and a half, Bitcoin might pull in 50, maybe even $100 billion. And so I think Ethereum could hit 2025. So the starting date for the ETF trading in the US is going to be July 23rd. He shared on that post that we just looked at that the SEC is answering issuers today, asking them to fill out their paperwork by tomorrow. So the issuers filed their form on the 8th, but most of them left the fees out of the forms. According to Eric, this is likely a strategy from the asset managers to see how competitive the funds fees are, especially BlackRock's. If you didn't know, ETF issuers charge a fee, and we saw with the Bitcoin ETFs, it was a race to the bottom. The lower the fees, the more bullish it is for an investment vehicle. So if you have a 10% fee, you don't want to park your millions of dollars in there, but if you have a 0.05% fee, well, then it becomes a lot more attractive. So we love seeing low fees on the ETH ETFs here. But as highlighted by his fellow ETF analyst, James Seifert, this could mean that the ETH ETFs will start trading the same week as the Bitcoin conference. That's set to happen in Nashville. So if we get a launch, remember, on 7/23 on Tuesday, and Bitcoin Nashville is happening July 25th through the 27th. I mean, with the ETF launching on the 23rd, Bitcoin conference officially kicks off on the 24th. Very, very bullish scenario for crypto in general. I expect everything to start pumping then. So moreover, the ETFs open the door for the approval of ETFs for other cryptos as well. We got people applying for Solana ETF. So just bullish for the entire industry. Now, I said we're going to look at Bitcoin charts to determine, what is going to happen with the ETH ETFs. So January 11th was when Bitcoin ETFs were launched here. And you can see it was a local top. It just, kind of ended a nice little 85% pump right there. We went from about $26,000 all the way up to $49,000. But January 11th was the actual peak, and then we ended up dropping. So the ETH ETF could be bearish. We could pump up into the launch and then drop. But how long did it take for the Bitcoin to find its bottom? Well, the ETF launch, you can see it right there. We're going to wick it from the top and go all the way down to the wick to the bottom. It fell 20% in 12 days. So less than 2 weeks, Bitcoin found its bottom, and then it started its next leg up. And you can see Bitcoin just went on a tear. So after the markets shook out all the weak hands, buy the rumor, sell the news, you don't want anything to do with this Bitcoin ETF. Look how much it fell. It fell 20%. Get out while you can. Ended up pumping 90% after the fact. So after a little shakeout period, it went on a huge run. I am expecting a similar situation for Ethereum. But let me point something out. This was actually a bearish environment. So you can see the 20% drawdown. A lot of people are going to say, well, you know what? It was in the cards. We had a bearish divergence where the price was moving up as the RSI was heading down. And then some would say, well, the reason it fell is because it was just bearish. Well, ETH isn't bearish. Now, we don't have, any bullish divergence, but we don't have any bearish divergence either. So if we look right here, you can see Bitcoin fell. It was about 20% initially. Well, if ETH were flat upon the launch here, let's just say, it is around this $3,400 range. And if we were to fall 20%, folks, the downside target is right around 2,700. So you can see with Bitcoin, we fell 20% right there, and it was a very short amount of time. So ETH prediction, if we fall 20%, let's just assume it's around this level now, right around 3,400. A 20% drawdown is going to give you a pretty good opportunity, $2,700 Ethereum. Now, I'm not saying it's going to go to 2,700 before it pumps, but just that is what a 20% pullback looks like. But what about the pump there? Now, we measured from the bottom. Let's actually measure from the top. Bitcoin ended up going on a 50% pump over about 2 months. It was about 62 days technically. So 62 days, 50% pump. Well, what does an ETH 50% pump look like? Well, it looks pretty bullish, everybody, if you ask me. Let's just say, from the 23rd, and we go out 62 days, and we got a 50% pump, everybody. That has given us a very, very bullish September, potentially over a $5,000 Ethereum in September. I would love that, and that's not even going to be the top, folks. I think we're actually going to top out in 2025. So this would just be, I would say, a local top before we maybe, trade a little bit lower, maybe perform similar to Bitcoin. So after the ETH ETF, we got a Bitcoin ETF pump, and then the market's consolidated a little bit. Ethereum will probably get an ETH ETF pump, and then the market's probably consolidated for a period. And then after that, that's when we start talking about $7,000, $8,000, even $10,000 Ethereum. But I said, with Bitcoin, it was a bearish environment, and ETH, there's some things saying it's actually a very bullish environment. One of the things making it bullish, supply crisis is looming. Exchange balances are now down to 10%, while 40% of ETH is locked up in smart contracts. Most investors still don't realize how tight the ETH supply is and how big the effect of the ETF will be. Zoomed in on this chart right here, the blue line is ETH supply in smart contracts. So you can see, just locking up more and more in smart contracts. Red line is the exchange balances. You can see that thing is just dropping as well, creating an environment where these ETH ETFs are not going to have enough Ethereum to purchase. It's going to create a supply crunch, which will then pump the price of Ethereum in a huge way. And then I'm just going to end with a very bullish chart that we shared, I think, about a week ago. Everyone focusing on Germany and Mt. Gox. Meanwhile, ETH ETF about to launch, and the ETH chart looks identical to Bitcoin before it pumped 200% last year. Study the ETH ETF rallies, and this is just very, very close similarities here. You can see they actually superimpose these charts onto this side, and you can see the lines, the chart, the candles just coinciding beautifully here. History even comes close to rhyming. Huge news for Ethereum. I do think we can have a $5,000 Ethereum in the coming months after the ETH ETF, but beware, we could see that 20% pullback to the downside. So these are some of the targets I'm looking at, and hopefully I'll see you and your diamond-handed ETH bags. Don't sell it all to BlackRock. I'll see you at the top.